Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Pause and Reflect with Dr. Lalitaa, where we're going to be talking sort of all things about developing yourself, aren't we, Dr. Lalitaa?
Yeah, that's right, Kirsty. And we're going to go deeper. So we're going to be talking about real life things that affect each and every one of us, relationships, how we function at work, and just life in general. So I'm really keen to get started with this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So this is going to be a monthly show, and the whole point of it is it's designed to be really interactive. So if you're watching this, feel free to pop a comment in, ask us anything. I will bring them up. If you have any ideas for things you'd like us to delve deeper into, again, this show is designed for you guys, so please feel free to do that. Without further ado, though, shall we get started on today's show, where we are going to be talking about how self-confidence affects your leadership. Now, in the kind of promo for this, we spoke about self-confidence and self-esteem. So can you sort of explain what the difference is and why one of them is better than the other?
So when we think of self-confidence and self-esteem, I think people get very confused between the two of them and what each of them represent and what each of them mean. So a lot of people will say to me, Lalitaa, I'm really struggling with my self-confidence. And when we start talking about it, it's not confidence, it's their self-esteem. So confidence is the way that we believe that we believe about what we believe about our abilities, whereas with our esteem, it's what we believe about ourselves. So for example, I might believe that I'm really, really confident at being able to talk about a specific topic like trees. I know all about trees and I can sit here and I can talk confidently, but behind the scenes, I might really struggle with my self-esteem because me as a person I don't feel confident in who I am. I don't feel enough. So that then doesn't show up because I'm talking all about trees and the spotlight's on the trees. But when I start focusing on myself and having discussions about myself, I can really struggle with that. So there is a key difference there. They do overlap, but there is that difference and how they show up.
So would you say then that self-esteem is very internal and self-confidence it's not necessarily external, but it's more what you do rather than what you are?
It's more of the doing. Exactly. You've got it. So it's more of the doing, whereas internal, and often we don't know what people's esteem is because people can be good at presenting and talking all about a specific topic, but not necessarily when they're talking about themselves, they can really struggle then.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense to me. I understand that. So with today, although we're saying self-confidence affecting your leadership, are we actually going to be talking about self-esteem?
Yeah. And it's about going back into how we feel as a person, because again, people think that it separates my work life, but you bring yourself into your work life. And sometimes we forget that. So if you don't feel enough, if you struggle with or have beliefs of I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with all these different beliefs that you might be carrying with you, that will show up in how you're presenting in your everyday life, how you're managing a team, how you're relating to people, the opportunities that might be coming your way. It's everything that's going on in your mind with your self-talk. And it's being mindful because although it's internal, that's the thing that's sort of guiding you externally.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be talking about how we can sort of lift our self-esteem and then how that affects ourselves as leadership. Great. Now, I think the first part of that we've spoken about before is about how we talk to ourselves, or you refer to it as self-talk. Yes.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what self-talk is, and then we'll look at some examples?
Yeah. So when we think of self-talk, it's what goes on up here. So not everyone's going to see it. Not everyone's going to hear it. You hear it. You know it's there. So it could be negative and it can be positive. It can be motivating, but it can also be very limiting. So something, I'm going to jump ahead and jump with examples here, but something that might be limiting might be that there's something wrong with me. So I might have something in the back of my mind saying, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong because I'm trying to do something. So I might be trying to send an email. It's not going through. The laptop's just frozen and it's like, what's wrong with me? So rather than being or understanding that, okay, there might be something going on with the laptop today or IT is down, for whatever reason, I blame myself.
Right.
But a positive way of sort of reframing that and motivating yourself is actually sometimes things do go wrong and sometimes things don't really go to plan, but that's not a reflection of me as a person. So that changes that self-talk and how you're showing up. And it's being mindful that when you do get something negative, sometimes we're guided and we will think there's something wrong. And that then impacts on your behaviors because you might be like, I don't want to talk to anyone today. And staying very quiet, staying very withdrawn from other people. But it is about trying to understand, like, for example, the positive there is something that sometimes things don't go to plan, you feel different when you hear that, because you're talking from a place of compassion rather than beating yourself up and almost like being your own bully in your head.
Yeah. So I think as well with this, when you're a leader, obviously you have to have that compassion for other people. Now, some people find it very easy to do it with other people and not so much themselves. But some people, I think it definitely starts when you treat yourself like that, when you have those conversations in your head, which you, I mean, if you're anything like me, tend to have more of those internal conversations, then I think it then becomes easier with your team to use it with them and to make them feel better about stuff, because then if they're not beating themselves up, they're going to be more productive, and therefore it kind of is a top down type thing. Do you agree?
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that is sometimes people will be like, I don't know how to do it for myself. And it's like, but you can do it for your team. You do it for other people. You do it for people that you love at home, or people, your friends, your family. There's people that you do it with. So it means that you have the ability to do it for yourself. But sometimes you just don't know how to, because you've never had that relationship with yourself. So moving forward, it's applying how you are with others to how you are with yourself.
Okay, so we are as well in this, we have got some tips that we're going to be looking at, 3 really practical tips where we're going to delve a little bit deeper and talk about how we can sort of talk to ourselves nicer. But before we move on from that, I did have a question. And if, by the way, anybody watching this, if you have any questions to bring up or if you have any comments, please come and talk to us. It's so nice when we have people to chat with us. It's lovely. My question, I suppose, is what happens if you don't even notice that you're doing sort of negative self-talk? Like if it's so natural to you that it's sort of subconscious, is that a thing, or do you always kind of recognize that it's negative?
No, we don't always recognize that it's there. Like even when I'm working with individuals, sometimes it's only until we start talking, they're like, yeah, that does happen, that does happen, because they normalize it. They think it's just a way of them being. So it's only when you stop and you allow this pause and reflection and sort of like using experiences as research. So you're looking at things that you've done, things, the way that things have happened, understanding your mood, understanding where has this come from, what happened. So when the laptop didn't work, what did I do? How did I treat myself? What did I say in my own head? So it is really going back to this title of pause and reflect, and pausing to then be able to understand what's going on in my inner world, because sometimes we're just go. At the end of a day, we're tired, we're exhausted, we want to just sleep, and then we're back to the same thing. And we're so just trying to hide away from what's going on internally because we may not want to face it. But having that space to pause, to reflect and go inwards is really powerful, because that's where then the research, the development comes from.
Okay, perfect. So I'm loving this already. So we have had a very lovely comment. So same as someone saying, thank you very much for, allowing everyone to get involved. And we're excited about this topic too. And you're lightning and shining. That's lovely. That's a great way to start the session, isn't it? Okay, so let's go on now. The whole point of these videos, of these pause and reflect, is that we're going to be really practical, aren't we? We're going to have really tangible things that people can go ahead and do. So the first of those tips that we have is to stop comparing yourself to others. Can you delve a little bit deeper onto this?
Yeah. So stop comparing yourself. It's so easy, isn't it? It's so easy for us to sit here and be like, right, a practical tip, go away and just stop comparing yourself. But when you're in the real world, it doesn't work like that, because you'll be doing it at a sort of a subconscious level where you might just be looking around, flicking through social media, noticing other people in the workplace and thinking, oh, look at everyone else. And what about me? And this is where it's like, it comes back down to pausing, reflecting, and tuning into feelings that you're feeling, because that's where then you get to understand, hang on, if I'm feeling a little bit anxious around this person, or if I'm noticing my mood just lowering because I'm not, I can't finish certain work like other people have, or I'm not able to do this like other people. It's being mindful of what you're saying to yourself, and realizing that we're all different, we're all unique, we're all very, very different. So someone else within the workplace might be really good at doing one thing that you're not really interested in, but you're good at something else. So it's you staying in your lane and focusing on the things that you can see that you work well with, and not then when you do start going there, which naturally we do as humans, it's like, okay, I'm doing that thing where I'm comparing myself and I'm noticing my mood changing. Let me come back here.
I think I always like the sort of analogy, like a swan on a river. You see this swan that's all graceful and just swimming around and just looking majestic. And then under the water, they're like swimming like crazy. And I think when you compare yourself to others, you see this graceful outside bit. but odds are that they have the same internal sort of monologues and the same things that you have. So this comparison doesn't work for anybody, does it?
No. And everyone thinks that. They think, oh, everyone else has it. You look at their grass and it's like their grass is greener, their grass is greener. And it's like, but what about your grass? So sometimes it's about coming back and looking at what you have and not then just running off thinking everyone else has it like this and everyone else, because that also is a reflection of self and where you might be. And why is it that you keep comparing yourself? Is there something going on within you? And that's where you can delve deeper into that. There's so many layers of it.
Yeah. I think the other thing I really like about this one is you're in control of what happens in here. Anything within the skin is, you may not feel it always, but ultimately you have the power to get the reins. Whereas other people you can't, and that's again so helpful when you've got a team, because you can empower them and you can give them that self-reliance, but also that support. So when you start doing it for yourself, you can then sort of help your team to do it. So it becomes like this really positive arena, and I think positivity encourages positivity. So I'm a huge fan of number one. I very much like it. Okay, so shall we move on to point number two now, which is, you sort of mentioned it in point number one, which is be mindful of how you talk about it. Now, we obviously spoke about this with negative and positive thought process. Is that what you mean, or is there another layer to this?
I think there's another layer, which is, yes, okay, be mindful, but start noting things down. So you've got your phone with you most of the time. You'll have like, again, a journal. If you don't, really good to invest in one. And when you're noticing things, write it down, write down the situation, write down what happened, write down what you noticed within yourself, because this is how you start to understand, okay, when this happened in the workplace, or when I noticed this is when I started to say this, or this is when I noticed this is what the feeling was. So it's awareness that you're gaining from being more mindful. And when you have awareness, you then take that into understanding, why do I do this? Why does this come up? Then you can move into like consciously changing the behaviors, because you're like, I get it. I get where this is coming from, deeper and deeper in the layers. So when we say be mindful, yes, be mindful, start noticing, but start actually doing something with it by just noting it down and starting to realize what the patterns might be.
That's so interesting to me, because I think very often when you start on a journey sort of around improving how you treat yourself, there's this thought that you should just, well, I know what I want to do, so I should just do it. And the fact that you've described it as almost three different steps, really, isn't it? Is first is sort of taking the space to just actually think about it. Secondly, be thinking, oh, I should be doing this. And then third, actually doing it. Like it's not just a one step and done. And there aren't people out there who are just perfect at this. There's always going to be a time when you're like,
there's no such thing as perfect, Kirsty. Like, everyone's different. So someone might get it straight away. I remember being at school and people would just look at things and they'd remember it. And I'd be there like, I don't remember. And you have to just keep at it. But it's realizing that it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that there's something that you're not doing right. It's like, let me understand what this pattern is. Let me understand and go deeper into making sense of where does this come from. So first, awareness that this is what's going on. Then move on to understanding the layers and layers of where does this come from. Then, okay, how do I change this? And knowing that just because just because you're aware, doesn't mean that, okay, I'm aware now, everything's going to be okay. It's like, no, there's going to be times where we will fall down. There's going to be times where the thoughts come, the thoughts are always going to be there. And it's like, how do we manage it moving forward, rather than thinking, that's it, I'm aware now, everything's going to be fine, and I'm forever not going to have these, this negative sort of self-talk.
So I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. So when it comes to sort of recognizing this, is this something that we should be doing as it's happening? So if I'm thinking to myself, oh, Kirsty, you're an idiot, should I be then going, no? Or is it something that maybe I go home after the end of the day and I sit down with a cup of tea and my favorite TV show on, and I think, I was really hard on myself today. Like, how when I'm recognizing it, is it something I should do instantly, or is there a level of reflection involved?
So if you're doing it instantly, I think sometimes it can impact on like the way you're relating, and it's not always possible. You might be presenting in front of someone's asked a question and you're just like, why did they ask that question? And you can't be like, 1 minute, I just need to make a note here and reflect on what's going on. So I think it's about realizing that, okay, you know what, I do have this, I just noticed that when they asked me this question, I noticed something in my stomach, I noticed this. And you know what, maybe you jot it down in your phone. So you get your phone, you jot it in your phone, or what you can do is remember it for later, but make sure you put it in it's somewhere, because what will happen is come end of day, you're like, oh, how was the day? Yeah, it was fine, everything was okay, because you've forgotten about it, because often we skim past, we forget. So it might be really good just to notice that, okay, if this is what is going on, jot it down somewhere when you get a chance, and then you can go deeper into it when you have space, when you've made that space for yourself.
Okay, and around sort of making space, because particularly if you're in a leadership role, odds are that there's definitely two sides of your job. There's normally the element of your job that you are doing as a professional, and then there's the element of your job where you are developing and building and responsible for a team. So very often, if you're in a space of leadership, you don't have a lot of time. Like it's a precious thing. So is this something that you need to carve out, like an hour a day or an hour a week, or is it something that you can sort of scribble down 5 minutes every day when you get a chance? Or is there no real right way of doing it if you're trying to create a space of recognizing when you're doing this talk?
Yeah, really interesting question. Really, really interesting, because again, everyone's different, and everyone's diary is different. And it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, Stephen Bartlett's, and he was talking about time and how sometimes as professionals we're trying to manage our time. And someone wrote a comment which I thought was really interesting about energy. It's not about time, it's about the energy that we're putting in. And sometimes you're go busy, trying to do everything, trying to manage all your time, and putting everything in, that by the end of the day you're exhausted. So then your priority isn't, oh, okay, I need to now make this space for me, I need an hour here for me, because you don't have the energy to do that. So it's about where do we prioritize? And it doesn't have to be an hour, it could literally be 10 minutes that you've prioritized during the day, if you want to. Or if you're someone who prefers, I don't want to be doing it in the day because I know I'm at work and I just need to be in that work mode, but when I have finished for my day, or at 6-7 o'clock, that's my time, I'm going to spend 10 minutes, going to go for a walk, have these 10 minutes to just focus on these things that came up for me. So you're noting them down. Or it might be that actually I prefer doing it once a week on a Sunday evening, that's my time to do it, and I'll sit there and I'll go through all the different things that have happened. So it's really trying to understand what works for you, not saying that this is the formula, go away. It's trying to apply. Everyone's different. So what is going to work for me, rather than me trying to fit myself into a box that everyone else should fit into, because that's not always going to work for you.
Yeah, I really like that. And again, if you're a leader as well, it's worth being cognizant of the fact that because a Sunday afternoon works for you, excuse me, just because a Sunday afternoon, like an hour sitting down with a cup of tea and your fluffy slippers works for you, doesn't necessarily mean if you're kind of encouraging this behavior in your team, it's going to work for them. So this idea that you said about just trying stuff, and maybe parts of it works for you and parts of it doesn't, maybe it doesn't work at all, maybe it really works, and having that ability to begin with, to just sort of flex with it, I think is a really powerful thing. So it's really interesting that you said that.
Yeah, and it goes back to number one, which is don't compare yourself with others. Like, just because that works, and also as a leader, just because that's what you're doing, don't expect that from your employees either, because they'll have their own ways of doing things or reflecting. But it is encouraging them to do a similar thing, which is having that space to reflect, and just understand things that are going on in the workplace, or not even in the workplace, even things that are going on at home. Making space to process some of this, because sometimes you carry it, and by the end of the day, you're someone might say something, it's like, oh, I don't know where that is, and you've just snapped at them because your bottle is very, very full of all these little things that have happened. But that's a conversation for another episode.
Another day, another episode, which I'm very much looking forward to. Okay, so I feel like we've understood that comparing ourselves to others is folly. It's not going to give us good results, and there's an element of that which is turn yourself internally and be aware of how you talk to yourself and the language that you use, and how you respect yourself. So then this third point that we've got, this third practical tip, is live your values. Now this is, I feel like, not as necessarily as obvious as the other one. So can you explain what you mean by live your values?
Yeah, so when we talk about living your values, as I said, each and every one of us are very, very different. So we have, like, look, we're all different in this sort of example, but everyone is different. Exactly. And each and every one of us will have our own values, our own value system. So this goes back to comparing, but it also goes back into awareness of what are your values as a leader? What do you notice are your values, and are you living your values? And if you're not, then it's like, okay, let me actually intentionally make a list of all of the different things that I feel are my values as a leader. Then you go back and you reflect on the week and think, actually, did I apply it, or did I notice how I applied my values in my workforce this week? And if you did, celebrate. Really embrace the fact that, you know what, I stuck with my values, and I know that I'm showing up as I want to be. So if you are saying, I want to be empathetic, or I want to be like this, I want to be like this, you're showing up in this way by looking at examples of how you've done that, and you're really embracing it, because it's not always just looking at how you always need to improve, you need to do this, you need to do this. It's also how you're being. How are you being as a leader? How are you showing up as a leader? And really taking that in, that I'm really grateful that I am showing up and I'm choosing to follow my values, and not then get distracted by, oh, but that leader or that manager is really hard on their employees, or they're doing it like this, or I should be doing it this way. It's like, no, come back in your lane, focus on your values, and focus on what's important to you. So that's what this sort of tip is all about, is focus on you, come back to your values, go internally.
So with that, obviously you were speaking about, like, you know, how you treat your team, were you empathetic with your team? Is that also something that you should turn internally? So I try to be empathetic with my clients, with my team, but I was also empathetic with myself, and I should celebrate that just as much as I should external.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you'd be surprised at how many people struggle with that. How many people struggle to be empathetic, to be compassionate with themselves. And the more that you're showing and proving that you can do it with other people, the more you realize, I can do this for myself as well. And it's not going to be like a quick next day, I'm an expert at this. It's like, no, it's an ongoing, it's work in progress, and it's being okay with that.
Okay. And another question I have is, you know, some teams will have celebratory, you know, like they'll say, like, they'll call people out and be like, you know, you did this great thing this week, somebody else did this great thing. Is that something that you think is a good idea? Because, you know, some people may not like it. Or is it something that this kind of living your values and celebrating yourself, is it more of an internal thing?
Yeah, I think it's more of an internal thing. I mean, you can all do it together, but I think when we look into, like, oh, look at what this person, what about the people that are very quiet, or have like low self-esteem, and may not shine bright, and that then can also fulfill, like, with them, that see, like, I know I'm not good if they don't get seen, because they may be very good at sort of masking or showing up very differently to their value system, or they may not be aware of, like, their values, because they haven't done that sort of direct work. So I think it's all about, how do we keep growing as a team? How do we keep growing each other and supporting each other, and coming from a place of compassion, as opposed to coming from a place of, we need to get to the next level, or the next, it's like, we're still people at the end of the day. We're all growing in our own different ways, and it's all about celebrating ourselves, but also then how we connect together as a team.
Yeah, because I think when you're a leader, the premise is that your team should emulate the values that you have. You know, it all starts with the leader, doesn't it? Those values, and they trickle down. So should you be very open with those values? Should you, if you're having like small reviews with your team, should you, like, maybe say, like, you know, this is one of our values, you know, how do you feel you're doing on it? Or do you understand what it means? Is it something that you should check in with your team on around your values? Or is it something, again, is very internal?
So I know some leaders who, what they've done is they've created like a code of honor, and that code of honor becomes codes that they want, like, the team to be, and that everyone's like respectful, or everyone's very like honest. It can be simple things like that, and they've got this on there. So everyone knows these are our values as a team that we follow through. And sometimes when you have a check-in with your staff, or even like if they want to come to you and say, actually, I didn't feel like you were doing some things, it's you being open as a leader to be like, okay, what did you not notice, or how do we measure these as well? So it can go really deep into understanding this, but again, it depends on the leader and if that's something they're comfortable with bringing up, because they may not also be high into like self-development and wanting to like go inwards. They're might be more results driven, and if they're more results driven, then that won't work for them. But I do know some people that have used this code of honor, and it's worked really well.
Okay, that's absolutely fascinating. Okay, we are unfortunately coming towards the end of our time now. So, I mean, if I may, I think if I were to just kind of quickly summarize up what we've spoken about before we move on, first thing is, stop comparing yourself to others. There is this element of, particularly in business, if you're a competitive industry, that there's this sort of you're very aware of other people and how they appear. But in actuality, you don't know what's going on inside, and you're much more in control of what happens internally in your head. So that's where you should focus. And when you're doing that, when you are being internal, you should really be mindful of how you talk about yourself. You know, don't get stuck in those things of it's all me, what's wrong with me, it's my fault, everything's going wrong. Sometimes things are out of your control, and even if that's not necessarily something you feel comfortable with, just try talking to yourself in a more positive way and saying, you know, this is out of my control. I'm going to try really hard to move forward from this, and it's not a reflection of me as an individual. And then finally, as a leader, you should have values that your team runs by and that you run by, and you need to celebrate when you live by those values. When something happens and you think, yes, that's something that's really important to me and I did it, even if it's a really small thing, like, you know, if integrity is something and you told the client that you might be 5 minutes late to something, or even a small thing like that, you have to live your values and you have to celebrate them. Do you think that's a fair sort of summary?
Yes, I do. Well done, Kirsty. You were listening. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent news. Okay, so sorry, carry on.
No, I said 10 out of 10.
Yes, it's a winner. It's a winner for me. Okay, so in a second, Dr. Lalitaa, we are going to be coming to you because we've spoken about a fair amount of things today. And what we're going to do on Pause and Reflect is we're always going to have what we refer to as like a top tip, which is something that's really small that people can easily implement. So we're going to come to you in a second. But before then, shall we talk about next month's show? As we mentioned earlier, this show will be run monthly. So it will be kind of in the first-ish week of August. And if I'm correct in thinking, we're talking about high functioning individuals and high achieving individuals, and anxiety. What exactly does that mean?
So it's you going yes when I said 10 out of 10. Like when we think of high achieving, what can end up happening is we're always like striving to the next thing. And sometimes that can come from a place of fear, because where I need to do this. And when we don't, we feel out of control. And that can then really impact on our anxiety levels. So what we'll be talking about next time we meet is talking about high functioning, high achieving, and how that links to anxiety, but also tips and tools, like strategies to help you manage that anxiety, so you're not then constantly fueled on anxiety to get things done.
Oh, I am very excited about that because I believe I'm going to take quite a lot from it. So that's fantastic. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a top tip, which is today's top tip is going to be pause and have space to reflect. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so we are so busy, always next thing, our to-do list. There's so much on there. There's always something to do. And even when you go home, it's like, next thing, I need to do this. Before you know it, you're in bed, and it's like the next day, and before you know it, it's Friday. And you're like, where has the week gone? So we do need to take intentional space. If that's something that you've booked out in the diary, if that's like your wellness hour that you have at work, and it's trying to understand, where is this space that I'm going to give myself? Because you can make that space. And space means you don't have your phone there, you don't have your emails open, you don't have other things that are going to distract you. It's space for you just to sit, to pause, to go inwards. It might be that you just want to go and have like your coffee outside somewhere without any distractions. It might be that you're going to take 5 minutes to just go for a walk during your lunch hour break. It can be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a whole hour. It doesn't have to be you have to sit down with a pen and you have to think about every little moment. It's just having space to pause and just touch base with what's going on within me. What am I noticing is going on within me right now?
Just having a breather. I really like that. And I think that's something that I feel like every person, you know, can find 5 minutes, like whether it's when you're making a cup of tea and, like you say, you just go and sit down, or you just, you know, before you get into your car and drive off, you just take a few deep breaths before you turn the ignition on. So I really like that point. Now, we have had a really lovely comment come through, which was, today's been a really worthwhile topic, and that they found bringing up values during appraisals individually and in team meetings, because some people prefer speaking one-to-one and others in a group setting. And what I like about that is you're taking your team into account and realizing that everyone's individual. So I think that's a really great point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time now. So I would like to thank everybody for watching. It's always fantastic. And anybody who gave comments, thank you very much. Dr. Lalitaa, thank you for just being a wealth of knowledge today. So thank you.
No, thank you for being here and supporting me on this. And I'm just really looking forward to getting these up and running because I think they're definitely needed, and just real life conversations with practical tips to take away, and having this space to just pause and reflect and just think about things is going to be really powerful for you. So looking forward to having more of these.
Fantastic. Okay, we will see you all in about a month.
Bye.